In 2009, 4 countries, Brazil, China, India, and Russia, came together to form an organization known as BricS. In 2010, South Africa joined BricS to make it BricS. At the time, BricS was merely an organization of countries with the top emerging economies. But since then, BricS has grown into a bloc with a mission of creating a new global system free from the hegemony of the West. But that's not all. Recently, BricS added 9 new partners in addition to the 4 countries that were admitted as members in January 2024. This is remarkable because, with these 9 additional partners, BricS now controls half of the world population and 41% of the global economy. But who are these partners, and what benefits do they bring to BricS? Let's find out. In October 2024, the 16th BricS Summit was held in Kazan, Russia. During this summit, 13 countries were invited to become BricS partners. These countries include Belarus, Bolivia, Cuba, Indonesia, Kazakhstan, Malaysia, Thailand, Uganda, Uzbekistan, Nigeria, Algeria, Turkey, and Vietnam. However, only 9 of the 13 countries accepted the invitation. These 9 countries are Belarus, Bolivia, Cuba, Indonesia, Kazakhstan, Malaysia, Thailand, Uganda, and Uzbekistan. As of now, the other 4, Nigeria, Algeria, Turkey, and Vietnam, have not yet given a formal response. According to the Russian government, which made the announcement in December, responses are expected from the other 4 in the near future. Now, as we stated at the beginning of the video, BricS was founded in 2009 as Bric by Brazil, Russia, India, and China. But it turned to BricS with the addition of South Africa in 2010. 13 years later, at the 2023 BricS Summit in Johannesburg, South Africa, BricS expanded again, extending an invitation to its membership to 6 countries. These countries include Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. In January 2024, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, and the United Arab Emirates accepted the invitation and officially became BricS members. Argentina initially agreed to join when it had a center-left government led by President Alberto Fernandez and Vice President Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner. However, when the far-right pro-US leader Javier Milei came to power in December 2023, he overturned the decision and stopped Argentina from joining BricS. As for Saudi Arabia, the kingdom has not yet made a formal decision on whether to join or not. With the new 9 additional partners, it's clear that BricS is very powerful in Asia and is growing steadily in Africa. Currently, there are 4 African countries that are affiliated with BricS, which are South Africa, Egypt, Ethiopia, and Uganda. 2 more African countries, Algeria and Nigeria, may decide to join in the near future and will be a great addition. Nigeria, for example, is the most populous country in Africa with one of the biggest markets in Africa. It's also among the top 10 oil-producing countries in the world. Algeria, on the other hand, has the largest landmass in Africa. Moving on, Latin America now has 3 countries affiliated with BricS, including Brazil, Bolivia, and Cuba. Brazil is the largest and most populous country in the region, with the biggest economy. If you think about it, it's not surprising that Cuba would join the BricS alliance. While all the founding member countries have their differences, the one thing they have in common is their collective desire to break free from the current global financial and economic order dominated by the US and its allies. Cuba has one of the strongest reasons to join BricS. Like Russia, Cuba has been suffocated and isolated by the US. But it's even worse than Russia because this isolation has been ongoing for over 60 years thanks to an illegal US blockade. This occurred after the Cuban Revolution in 1959, which saw the nationalization of Cuba, high US import taxes, and forfeiture of US-owned economic assets, including oil refineries, without compensation. The US retaliated as it always does in situations like this by imposing an embargo on all exports to Cuba, with the exception of food and medicine in 1960. 2 years later, in 1962, the US imposed a full-scale blockade against the island after Cuba held nuclear missiles for the Soviet Union. The severity of the sanctions on Cuba made the United Nations to pass annual resolutions to suspend the embargo intermittently since 1992, but the US has refused to budge its stance. Thankfully, the principal purpose of the embargo on Cuba, which is forcing Cuba's revolutionary regime out of power and bending to the US, has never been achieved. So with countries like Russia and China, which have experienced the US sanctions, it's easy to see why Cuba joined BricS. Before we proceed, here is a reminder to like this video, drop a comment, and subscribe to our channel so that you can get more videos like this. Now, with its 9 additional partners, the BricS alliance has 18 member countries affiliated with it. Together, they represent more than 41% of the global economy and half of the world's population. BricS also constitutes 1/3 of global oil production, and its members are some of the largest producers of critical and essential minerals. In addition to this, BricS member countries produce huge amounts of critical foods such as cereals and meat. With all these, it's quite clear that BricS has grown to become a formidable economic powerhouse in the world's major sector. It is no longer an organization that the West can afford to ignore. The West knows this, and that is why President Trump threatened sanctions on BricS member countries if they dared to create a common currency that would unseat the dollar. We will talk more about this later. But here is an important question. What exactly does partner status mean? You see, the 9 additional countries affiliated with BricS do not have the full BricS membership status. What they have is known as partner status. But what does it mean? Partner status simply means that these countries do not automatically have full membership, but will work towards membership in the future. It's a similar process used by the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which many BricS countries are a part of. According to the reports, partner countries will have the opportunity to propose initiatives but will not participate in the approval of documents or voting. Now, as we said earlier, with the addition of 9 partner countries, BricS comprises roughly half the world's population. This means that BricS has over 4 billion people among its members and partners. It's easy to see why. If you check the list of the 20 most populous countries in the world, you will observe that 9 of those countries are now a part of BricS. India is the world's most populous country, followed by China, and each of them has more than 1.4 billion citizens. Indonesia, now a partner of BricS, is the 4th most populous country in the world with over 290 million people. If you add Brazil at the 7th position, followed by Russia in 9th and Ethiopia in the 10th, the figure already hits more than 3 billion people. Then there is Egypt, Iran, and Thailand. If you add all these countries' populations together, the figure is almost half the world's population. This is incredible. But what about the global economy? What portion of the global economy does BricS control with its 9 additional members? According to IMF data, the founding members of BricS made up 33.76% of the world's GDP as of October 2024. This simply means that the 5 founding BricS members comprise a larger share of the global economy than the G7, which only represented 29.08% of world GDP in 2024. This is a massive decline from the 1990s, when the G7 economies made up nearly 52% of world GDP. The major reason for this change is China. In recent years, China has experienced massive economic growth, making it the world's only industrial superpower. China is currently responsible for 35% of global gross manufacturing production, which is nearly 3 times that of the United States. But that's not all. According to data from the IMF, China overtook the US to become the largest economy on Earth in 2016. And, as of October 2024, China made up 19% of global GDP compared to the US 15%. It's no wonder successive US administrations, including the outgoing Biden administration and the incoming Trump administration, are trying to clip the wings of China's economy by imposing trade sanctions. Unfortunately for the US, the sanctions have done nothing to change the situation. Now, when BricS added 4 new members in January 2024, the share of global GDP controlled by BricS's 9 members rose to 36.44%. With the 9 additional partners, BricS's share of world GDP further increased to 41.41%. From all these, we can see why the US is agitated. You see, the US is regarded as the world's strongest economy as a result of its GDP. But the GDP of a country does not necessarily reflect the productive capacities of that country. What do we mean? According to economists, GDP, which is gross domestic product, measures the value of all goods and services produced by a country in 1 year. Now, the US economy appears strong because it has the highest GDP in the world. But the truth is that the US economy is overstated. Let's break it down. 21% of the US GDP comes from the FIRE sector, which are finance, insurance, and real estate. Another 13% of US GDP consists of professional and business services, from white-collar workers like lawyers and managers. But get this, manufacturing, which is the actual production of goods and services, makes up just 10% of the US GDP. Another 8%, as reported by the Bureau of Economic Analysis, is the imputed rental value of owner-occupied housing, or how much an owner of a house would hypothetically pay to rent a house they own and live in. What this simply means is that 8% of the US GDP does not really exist. It is merely accounting. In addition, another 18% of the US GDP comes from the health sector. It's interesting to know that the United States spends roughly twice as much on healthcare as the average advanced economy in the OECD, yet has some of the worst public health results. All this simply tells us that a huge part of the US GDP is merely bureaucracy, red tape, and fees. And just because the US has the highest GDP does not mean that its people benefit as shown by its health sector. So, a more useful assessment of a country's economic power should not be GDP, but the actual productive capacity of that country. BricS, for instance, is not just an economic powerhouse on paper. BricS is an economic powerhouse in reality. BricS members and partners are the world's leaders in the production of crucial commodities, such as cereals, meat, crude oil, natural gas, and strategic minerals like iron ore, copper, and nickel. According to the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, the main primary crops in the world, which represent more than half of global agricultural production, are respectively sugarcane, maize, rice, wheat, oil palm fruit, and potatoes. And BricS countries dominate global production of these primary crops. Brazil, India, and China, for instance, make up roughly 2/3 of the global production of sugar cane. China and Brazil represent nearly 30% of global maize production. China and India produce over half of the world's rice. China, India, and Russia produce more than 40% of the world's wheat. Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand comprise almost 90% of global oil palm fruit production. China and India produce nearly 40% of the world's potatoes. In terms of aquaculture production of seafood, China makes up nearly 60% of global output, but combined with India and Indonesia, they account for more than 70%. However, beyond agriculture, BricS is also an emergency powerhouse. China is leading the world's transition to renewable energy, building twice as much solar and wind power capacity as the rest of the world combined. BricS countries also play a major role in global production of crude oil. 5 of the world's top 10 producers of crude oil are in BricS, including Russia, China, Iran, the UAE, and Brazil. In terms of the natural gas industry, BricS also has a large share. Top natural gas producers in BricS include Russia, Iran, China, the UAE, Indonesia, and Malaysia. When it comes to strategic minerals, BricS is, again, highly influential. BricS countries are among the world's leading producers of iron ore, including Brazil, China, India, Russia, South Africa, Kazakhstan, and Iran. The admission of Indonesia as a partner likewise means that the world's only nickel superpower is now part of BricS, along with other important nickel producers like Russia, China, Brazil, and Cuba. With all these, it's quite clear that BricS has become one of the most important organizations on Earth, bringing together nations with massive populations, enormous economies, and incredible productive capacities. The fact is that if BricS can collectively and successfully coordinate to take strategic actions, their goal of creating a multipolar world, free from the hegemony of the US and its allies, will be achieved. The US knows this, and that is why Trump threatened to impose 100% tariffs on BRIC nations in order to stop the de-dollarization momentum. When BricS was founded in 2009, the US and the West in general didn't give BricS any attention. For them, BricS was a loose group made up of countries that had issues. However, in recent times, things have begun to change. BricS has grown steadily from how it started to become a bloc that controls 40% of the world's GDP and population. But that's not all. BricS has also grown to become a reputable bloc with the potential of crippling the hegemony of the United States. With its de-dollarization campaign, which focuses on using local currencies instead of the dollar for international trade, BricS has the potential to unseat the dollar. Right now, the US realizes this, and typical of the United States, President Trump responded with a threat, following the 16th BricS Summit in October, where Russian President Vladimir Putin accused the US of weaponizing the dollar and described it as a big mistake. Trump responded recently to this statement. In a post on his X page on December 1st, 2024, Trump demanded that BricS halt its plan of dumping the dollar in global trade. He said, "The idea that the BricS countries are trying to move away from the dollar while we stand by and watch is over. We require a commitment from these countries that they will neither create a new BricS currency nor back any other currency to replace the mighty US dollar, or they will face 100% tariffs and should expect to say goodbye to selling into the wonderful US economy. They can go find another sucker. There is no chance that the BricS will replace the US dollar in international trade, and any country that tries should wave goodbye to America." So, Trump says that any country that attempts to stop using the dollar for trade will be faced with 100% tariffs. This means that any country exporting its goods to the US will be hit with a 100% tariff. But isn't this the same tactic that made BricS launch the de-dollarization campaign in the first place? Well, it shouldn't be surprising given the fact that the US's best response to anything is threats and sanctions. But the question is, will Trump's threat work? Well, firstly, unlike other countries such as Canada Trump has threatened in recent times, BricS makes up 40% of the world's global population, 37% of global GDP, and 23% of global trade. This means that they actually have more leverage. In addition to this, the leaders of BricS member countries, including Russia, China, and South Africa, are not leaders that easily respond to threats. Recall that South Africa once took Israel, an ally of the US, to the ICJ despite facing the threat of a possible expulsion from the US AGOA initiative. Russia has been subjected to several sanctions by the US and yet has refused to give in to the demands of the US. The same goes for China. So, why President Trump would think that threatening these countries would do anything is beyond us. Trump thinks that imposing a 100% tariff will only affect countries exporting their goods to America. But the truth is, it will also affect American consumers because they will have to pay more for the same goods. Perhaps this is why most analysts think that it is just bluster. Besides this, BricS nations can decide not to export their goods to America. Yes, America has a huge consumer market, but it is not up to the BricS nations combined. In other words, it is America that will suffer for it. If the US wants to fix its economy, it better start looking inward. What are your thoughts? Let us know in the comments section below. Don't forget to like this video, share it, and subscribe to our channel.